hindi ko po natin na kaming nasa Amerika ay masyadong nagpakasasa sa paggasta sa pera na masyadong pinaghirapan ng mga kapatiran at ng mga full-time workers. Nakita ko na kahit pambili ng bigas ng membro, kailangan sakripisyo pa para lang maibigay sa simbahan kahit gugutumin pa ang mga pamilya. Nasaksihan ko po na kahit last centavo para pamasahe, kailangang ibigay pa rin. Bahala nang maglakad papuntang simbahan ang mga mahihirap na membro. Hindi kinaya ng aking konsensyang double standard life. Maraming workers ang napalo dahil sa panunood na ng sine, pero kami sa Amerika, halos linggo-linggo nanood ng sine, bawal sa amin ito dati. Naghirap ang maraming workers at members sa pagkaruling at pagsulisit sa bawat tao sa lahat ng dako dito sa ating bansa. May namatay, may na-aksidente, may nakulong, may mga na-rape pa na hindi na na-report. Dahil baka hindi paniwalaan at baka makapag-fasting pa dahil may kasalanan na itinago, kaya napahintulutang nangyari. Lahat may kota, di ba? Napakasakit po sa damdamin ko dahil ako po ang namuno sa mga fundraisings. After December season, ang mga members kailangan magtinda ng mga kakanin.
I would like everyone to listen to this video, to watch this video. Si Ms. Teresita, Ms. Ging, ang pinapatungkulan dito, but it will also give a sense of the threats that victim survivors face from within the kingdom. Open source po itong video na ito. In fact, galing sa public channel ni Pastor dati. So, ipe-play na po natin ngayon para mapanood nating lahat.
She contacted someone named Teresita Valdehuesa, who was a former worker here in the kingdom, who committed lapses of fornication with many ministers and men. That is why she was supposed to be disciplined, but she went out. This Alina Ostapchenko is saying things against me, and we were able to do record every bit of what she said. Listen to her voice. Everything that you have said to Teresita Valdehuesa, who is a former worker here, who also backslid because of some lapses in immorality, will give you a sample of her voice that was recorded. Go.
I'm fine, dear. I remember you, Bayo. And I'm so glad that I'm already out of the kingdom. And it's a miracle that how I exit from there. Because the time kasi I was so fanatic before. But when, time passed, I realized many things I can also share with you if you like. He asked me if I'm ready to dedicate my life. I said yes, because for me, I was thinking dedicate to God, so I never think about other stuff. And suddenly, he was on me already, and he was trying to pull my pants already off. And then things started to happen, and I understand that, oh my goodness, it's like I have to switch off my mind. I will not question, I will not ask if it's Father's will in my mind. That time, I will just not try not to feel anything like that. And because I was shocked by what's happening in the room.
You have to prove that in court. Because this is an international ministry, and I have an international reputation. You will be sued by the kingdom in all places that you've called. We will not let this pass. Teresita Valdehuesa will be part of this. So better get your lawyers and defend yourself. We have lawyers all over the world. Wherever there is a kingdom, we have a general counsel in the name of Attorney Michael Green. In America, we have 18 lawyers who are observing all the happenings in the kingdom. We have financial consultants. We have lawyers who will defend the kingdom wherever it is being attacked.
For the record po, yung pastoral na binanggit dito, si Ms. Alina, she gave her consent also to the playing of this video in this hearing. So, Ms. Teresita, meron po kayong testimonyang hinanda. Pwede nyo na pong basahin. You have the floor.
Good morning po, Madam Chair. In America, I witnessed the double standard life. What we prohibited in the Philippines, we did them there. We lived in luxury. We toured around. We dined in fine and expensive restaurants. We watched movies. Sky's the limit when they went shopping. I decided to stay in the apartment where the minister and his family lived. Despite the insistence of ICC to stay with them, I refused. I made a lot of excuses. Sapagkat, hindi ko po natin na kaming nasa Amerika ay masyadong nagpakasasa sa paggasta sa pera na masyadong pinaghirapan ng mga kapatiran at ng mga full-time workers. Bilang namuno po sa crusades, evangelism at logistics departments, saksi po ako kung paano nagsakripisyo ang bawat isa para lang makapagbigay sa iba't ibang pangangailangan sa simbahan. Nakita ko na kahit pambili ng bigas ng membro, kailangan sakripisyo pa para lang maibigay sa simbahan kahit gugutumin pa ang mga pamilya. Nasaksihan ko po na kahit last centavo para pamasahe, kailangang ibigay pa rin. Bahala nang maglakad papuntang simbahan ang mga mahihirap na membro. Hindi kinaya ng aking konsensya ang double standard life. Maraming workers ang napalo dahil sa panunood na ng sine, pero kami sa Amerika, halos linggo-linggo nanood ng sine, bawal sa amin ito dati. Naghirap ang maraming workers at members sa pagkaruling at pagsulisit sa bawat tao sa lahat ng dako dito sa ating bansa. May namatay, may na-aksidente, may nakulong, may mga na-rape pa na hindi na na-report. Dahil baka hindi paniwalaan at baka makapag-fasting pa dahil may kasalanan na itinago, kaya napahintulutang nangyari. Lahat may kota, di ba? Napakasakit po sa damdamin ko dahil ako po ang namuno sa mga fundraisings. After December season, ang mga members kailangang magtinda ng mga kakanin para maibigay sa mga pledges for Alay kay Kristo, building funds, love offerings, television pledges, tithes, and others. And when they could not provide for their own foods, they would just resort to fasting. Meron din pa akong quota, 10 to 15 million pesos to raise in the month of December alone. I organized the carolers nationwide to meet my quota. We recruited and trafficked our young people from Mindanao and Visayas to carol in the provinces of Luzon and in the national capital region cities. Marami pong estudyante na Nobyembre pa lang kailangan nang mag-absent sa paralan at ang iba hindi na nakabalik sa pag-aaral dahil inuna ang simbahan, inuna ang pagkaroling, inuna ang paghanap ng pera. But nobody questioned where our income was spent. Sa mga buwan ng Pebrero hanggang Oktubre, ang ibang workers na nasa logistics department kailangan mag-solicit na naman throughout the country using the permits of the different associations. Pag-asa ng buhay, Children's Way Foundation, tulong sa may kapansanan, handog ng pagmamahal, pagdamay sa dukha, Shivers for Christ. The supposed income na dapat ibigay sa mga beneficiaries, sa mga nasabing associations, hindi naman talaga truthfully and honestly na ibigay. Only a little portion of the income was shared to the beneficiaries. Ang ibang workers naman, walang hinto sa pagtinda rin ng mga kakanin na may quota of 500 to 1,000 pesos a day, Monday to Saturday. Ito ang buhay ng mga workers na nasa logistics department. In America, they began to notice my indifference. ICC called my attention, stating there were reports from my assistant in the logistics department in Manila that I had secretly sent money to my family. Then, she informed me that ministers wrote letters to ACQ and reported that I tempted and fornicated with them during my visits to their satellite churches. I was so shocked to learn of the sudden accusations. I also wrote a letter and enumerated the real circumstances of my life with all the ministers I came in contact with in relation to our aggressive fundraising, being the National Logistics Coordinator. However, that was not enough. I was then forced to write a long letter of confession, making it appear that I was a sinner who committed all kinds of sins, including those I had committed before joining the ministry. I complied, believing that through this written confession, I would be totally forgiven from my old sins and burdens and be completely sanctified. In detail, I wrote everything I thought was considered sin I had committed from childhood until the present. I also implicated ACQ in my sins. It had the same tenor of the letter I wrote in Hong Kong in 1994. And this time, he was furious. Then ICC instructed me to revise my letter. I was told not to implicate ACQ and to state that I was the sole sinner and I was filthy. Upon realizing how angry ACQ was, I revised my letter out of fear and stated that I had sinned because I truly was filthy. In detail, I imagined sins.
Ms. Teresita, yung paulit-ulit yung binabanggit na ICC, sino po yun?
Ingrid Chavez Canada.
Sila pa rin po. All right. Please proceed.
In detail, I imagined sins and I made it appear that I had committed them all. That was how stupid I was to obey and exaggerate my story. Just to appease the anger of our leader, Apollo C. QUIBOLOY, not knowing it would become my death sentence later. My exaggerated story was then distributed to all his leaders and ministers, and they believed I was filthy, I was pervert, and I was wicked, painting me as the sole guilty party, while ACQ remained innocent. Little did I know this confession would lead to my condemnation within the ministry.
And Ms. Teresita, pag sinasabi nyo ACQ, sino po yun?
Apollo Carrion Quiboloy po.
Alright.
October 15, 1998, I was sent back here to receive a punishment through prayer and fasting in the guise of spiritual discipline. And the fasting they planned for me was beyond my imagination. It took me 7 months to suffer hunger and isolation in the mountain of Tamayong in Kalinan, Davao City. They placed me in a small, dark, elevated room beside a kitchen, separated only by a mat and walls. My bed was rough, made of uneven slabs, with exposed nails pressing into my back as I slept. I woke up this morning in pain, with no beddings, and the cold October nights left me shivering. I requested a blanket and a mat, but I was denied. Every day from 8 to 5 p.m., I followed a strict routine, regardless of the weather, enduring hunger and isolation. No one allowed near me, as I was labeled filthy and deserving of this punishment. Members were forbidden to speak to me. I was physically very weak and so depressed. I prayed that God would just take my life. Ilang beses po ako nanalangin na sana kunin na ako ng Panginoon. I started to question God and wondered if this was truly a divine process or simply human punishment. I asked myself, is this ACQ's way of retaliating because I rejected the life he imposed on me? It felt like vengeance and disguised as spiritual discipline. My only solace came from reading the Word of God from Genesis to Revelation over and over again. Every day was a struggle of faith. I struggled to believe that the process was still the perfect will of God for me. I struggled to believe that I really was a sinner and that I was recuperating from my spiritual disease for the lack of faith. That was to justify my present pains and to at least lighten my burden of loneliness. On January 8, 1999, I gave ACQ a resignation letter and I requested for a fare so that I can travel back to my home in my province. He did not approve my resignation letter. I pleaded to Ingrid, and like a child, I cried for help. But she remained untouched, telling me that it was a divine process. After that conversation, misery doubled. I had no money, and I was still physically weak. So there was no way for me to go out from the compound of the prayer mountain. Waiting for the restoration was the only alternative at the moment. If not for the comforting words of God, surely I would be totally gone out of my mind. They continually accused me of sins they alone knew, unimagined, that would always lead me into fasting. It eventually hardened my heart because I started to realize that the purpose of doing it was to totally break me down and to even slowly kill me. I no longer saw the reason to stay. I submitted my resignation as a full-time volunteer worker for the second time. But Apollo Carrion QUIBOLOY refused it again. A week later, on September 30, 1999, I decided to leave without asking for permission, determined to free myself from his control. It was only when I left out of the group that I finally clearly understood that the man I had believed to be God's chosen and holy was an impostor, oppressor, and deceiver. He manipulated me using his authority and power as God's anointed. I thank God that he took me out from his bondage, from that ambiguous feeling of fear mingled with so much love and loyalty to my Redeemer, Jesus Christ. But he was not finished with me and did not stop terrorizing me. Alex Camia, his personal bodyguard, a full-time worker, once known to be a champion in gun shooting before he joined the group of ACQ, together with his team, kept coming to my place to harass me, serving a fake warrant of arrest to a minister who stayed in my house. This minister settled in my place after he was gunned down in Davao City but survived. The team of Alice Camia was apprehended, and when investigated, they had several firearms in the car, several plate numbers, and there was also a red plate. The registered owner of the car was Apollo C. QUIBOLOY. Because of their failure to serve the warrant of arrest, they blamed me for hiding the minister and filed cases against me of obstructing justice and grave misconduct and an act unbecoming of a public official. After that incident, I heard that Alex Camia was the suspect of the murder of an ex-worker who was shot down inside his home, and this ex-worker did not survive. I was scared to death when I heard this news. My option was to remain silent because killing could have actually happened when Camia and his group came to my place. There was also an ex-worker, Elsa Bolivar, who was a senior citizen, a woman shot dead while she was in her garden in Tagum City. I was so hysterical when pictures of her bullet-ridden body were sent to me because she had just visited me in my place before it happened. Fear consumed me, and I remained silent. 3 years ago, nagkausap po kami ni Alex Camia. Humingi po siya ng kapatawaran at nagsabi na siya ay nautusan lang po na kailangan din akong iligpit. Pinaniwala po siya na ako ay may malaking kasalanan at ako ay napakasamang babae. Nang tinanong ko kung ano ang aking kasalanan, sinabihan daw siya na tinukso ko raw si Apollo Carrion QUIBOLOY. Nakiapi daw ako sa mga ministro. Narinig naman po ninyo yung sa video. Nakipagtalik daw ako mismo doon sa workers' house at nagnakaw daw ako ng 3 million pesos. He even said in Bisaya, Di ba nagtugot man ang Ginoo pagpatay sa dautan? Doesn't God permit the killing of the wicked? Doon ko lang naintindihan na kailangang i-declare ni Apollo QUIBOLOY sa lahat ng mga workers at members na ako'y makasalanan at napakasamang babae para magiging makatwiran ang lahat ng parusa na binigay sa akin at magiging makatwiran din kung bakit ako kailangang patayin. Apollo QUIBOLOY called me Jezebel, the temptress, using his pulpit to broadcast how filthy and evil I was. This became a pattern. Kung may mga workers na may alam sa kaniyang buhay, sa sikretong buhay, at aalis sa kanyang kingdom, sila ay akusahan na napakaraming kasalanan. He would always exaggerate their weaknesses at ipaniwala sa mga workers at members na sila ay umalis dahil may mga marumi at mga napakasamang mga tao. His followers only heard his side of the story, which was always filled with lies and twisted truths. The other side, our side, was never heard and was never allowed to be heard. They only believed whatever he fed them and even defended him and attacked those who defied their leader without investigating the truthfulness of the circumstances. Nakita naman po siguro natin kung paano siniraan ng mga workers at defenders ni Apollo QUIBOLOY ang mga testigo dito. Mga napakasamang descriptions para lang ipahiya ang mga nagsalita ng kanilang mga karanasan sa loob ng kanilang kingdom. Mga salitang hindi nababagay sa mga tinatawag na mga citizen ng kingdom of Jesus Christ. Their intention is only to demoralize and warn others of the consequences of defiance. Last August 2021, during one of his television programs, he once again maligned me, broadcasting nationally and internationally that I was a fornicator and an immoral woman, which we have just watched. Madam Chair, I would like to remind Mr. QUIBOLOY to remember the biblical stories about the lives of King Nebuchadnezzar, King Sennacherib, and King Herod. All of them fell into the hands of the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar, you know that, was separated from his people and lived like a beast and ate grass for 7 years. King Sennacherib died a tragic death, murdered by his own sons. King Herod was struck by the angel of God, died, and his body was eaten by worms. Their sin was that they replaced God with themselves, considering themselves as gods and blaspheming the one true God. This is all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Salamat po, Ms. Teresita, sa testimonya mo. Kahit kailangan mong iyakan para basahin sa amin. Bago yung isa munang follow-up question ko sa inyo, gusto kong i-acknowledge yung presensya online ni Senator Cynthia Villar. Salamat, Senator Cynthia, sa pagdalo nyo. At ang Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. Salamat kaayo sa pagdalo. Kung walang opening statement si Senator Coco at si Senator Cynthia, bago yung interjection ni Majority Leader sa Department of Justice, isang mabilis na follow-up question sa ngayon, Ms. Teresita o Ms. Ging, Ate Ging, just for the record, guilty ba kayo dun sa mga krimen na inakusa sa inyo, yung pagnakaw ng 3 million pesos, yung pag-fornicate sa iba pang mga ministro? Guilty ba kayo sa mga iyon?
Of course not.
All right. Salamat kaayo. Majority Leader, for your interjection with the
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing to do with the previous testimony. Magpapaalam po kasi ako kasi magsasalita po ako sa Liga ng mga Barangay and the Minority Leader is already here to fill up some legal questions likewise. But Madam Chair, before I leave, gusto ko lang tanungin ang, hindi ko kasi nakita kanina, dito pala ang Department of Justice relative to my previous questions answered by the DFA. This is speculative, academic, and purely legal. If, if an extradition request is lodged before the DFA, there is under the PD, which I cited before, a process which would necessitate the Department of Justice to file a petition. But that is another court. And that is another court which would constitute as the extradition court here in the Philippines. And if there is going to be an extradition hearing, the purpose is not to determine the guilt or innocence of the accused, but whether they would fall under the ambit of our extradition treaty. Is that correct? Who will answer? Attorney Torribillas or Attorney Quintana? Speculative lang ito. Ano lang to? Kasi-
Senior State Counsel Quintana, I believe, Majority Leader.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Your Honor. As to the as to what will happen on, should the Department of Foreign Affairs later on receive a request for the extradition of Mr. QUIBOLOY and the present criminal cases are filed against him, the Philippines, as a requested state under the Philippines-U.S. extradition treaty, has the option to postpone the filing of the extradition case, in which case,
Postpone.
only the filing, Your Honor.
But is the extradition court would be constituted here in the Philippines.
Yes, Your Honor.
Not necessarily the court where the hearing is being
Yes,
conducted.
it would be a separate separate proceeding, and as I mentioned, it might be postponed, or we can accept the request and file the case in a separate extradition
It
case.
will not be a criminal court.
No, Your Honor. As you correctly pointed out earlier, the extradition court is not there to determine the guilt or innocence of the subject of the request.
Thank you, attorney. But my second question is related to the first question and to the previous questions. The extradition shall not be granted under Article 4 when the person sought has been tried, convicted, or acquitted. Tama po ba yun? So pag may pending case na rito at mabilis yung proseso, conviction or acquittal, hindi na siya pwedeng i-extradite. Is that correct?
Your Honor, under Article 4, that may be a ground for refusal of the request for extradition, but that in that case, so Your Honor, ang ano po dun parang in effect parang double jeopardy. But in this instance po, there is no double jeopardy kasi po yung
Saying double jeopardy. One of the grounds for refusal would be when there has been a trial, conviction, or acquittal that's explicitly stated under Article 4 prior prosecution. Double jeopardy will not apply because of the concept of dual sovereignty. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, ang tanong ko, mas makakabuti ba na mas mabilis ang trial sa Pasig, which would result in either conviction or acquittal, dahil hindi na pwedeng ma-extradite?
Sir, it's independent of the request for extradition. So regardless if the criminal cases are terminated, are expedited, it will not affect the extradition request.
Siguro, aralin niyo mabuti itong Section 1 ng Article 4. Parang very explicit naman ito. You still have time. Number 3 question, I learned that correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you're following this through news accounts, that the Department of Justice of the United States dismissed the charges against a certain Miss Dueñas. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, and this was just a few weeks ago.
Last week, Your Honor.
Last week.
October 7.
So, ang tanong ko rito, and this will probably be a lingering question, what would be the effect of the dismissal of the U.S. cases against, is Dueñas a miss or a male? Ano ba yan? Female? She? Female. What would be the effect of the dismissal of the U.S. cases against Ms. Dueñas to the pending cases of Pastor Quiboloy in the Philippines, since some of the elements would be the same?
Your Honor, if I may defer to Prosecutor Torrevillas.
Torrevillas.
Deputy State Prosecutor Torrevillas, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator Tolentino. It will not affect the cases pending against Pastor Quiboloy, considering that Ms. Dueñas is not one of the accused in those cases.
One of the accused in cases pending before the Regional Trial Court here in Pasig or in the United States Department of Justice? Saan po? Saan jurisdiction?
Before the Regional Trial Court of Pasig and Quezon City, Mr. Senator.
So it won't affect.
Yes.
But there is an interrelationship between the elements involved in the U.S. cases and the Philippine cases. Tama po ba yan? And probably I'm not jumping the gun on what the defense counsels were doing. So walang effect. As I've said, this is just speculative.
It will not affect the cases pending before the Regional Trial Court of Quezon City and the Regional Trial Court of Pasig, because Ms. Dueñas is not one of the accused, neither she one of the witnesses for the prosecution.
But some of the defendants in the case pending before the U.S. Department of Justice are likewise defendants, are accused here in the Philippines. And I understand there would be a second hearing come May 20 before the U.S. Department of Justice. Tama po ba yan?
I am not aware of that.
Okay. So paano naman kung yun ang magkaroon ng ibang desisyon while pending dito sa Pasig and Quezon City yung ibang kaso? Any speculative answer? O kung wala, mahirap na
It
siguro.
has no connection at all
connection
because,
at all.
opo.
Different jurisdictions, different elements. Again, Madam Chair, maraming salamat po sa pagbibigay sa akin ng pagkakataong makapagsalita. I reiterate again my earlier statements that respect and dignity should permeate the entire proceedings today. And I hope that the dignity of the Senate through this committee will be enshrined, Madam Chair. Maraming salamat po sa pagkakataong ito at maraming salamat sa mga resource persons natin na dumalo. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. Dagang salamat.
Maraming salamat din po, Majority Leader, and of course, the Chair and the whole committee ay nakikiisa dun sa patuloy na pagtaguyod ng respeto at dignidad ng Senado at ng Senado para sa lahat ng lumalahok dito sa ating mga pagdinig. So, balikan po natin si Ms. Teresita, si Ate Ging, mga patuloy po na follow-up questions ko sa inyong testimonya kanina. So, batay po pa rin po dun sa testimonyang binasa nyo kanina. Anong taon nga po kayo sinimulang abusuhin ayon sa inyong testimony at alaala?
It was in October of 1993.
October of 1993. So, 31 years ago po.
Yes po.
Alright. Tapos ulitin ko lang po yung nabalitaan kong fasting o dry fast. So, hindi kayo pinakain, hindi kayo pinainom ng tubig. Ilang araw nga po ba ginawa ito sa inyo? At wala po bang kasamahan ninyo doon na sinubukang tulungan kayo?
Of course, nobody would ever dare help me because upon instruction na hindi nga ako and they were not even allowed to talk to me, nor even to come near to me. So actually there were two sets of fasting given to me. One set was, there was 10 days fasting. There was no food, no water. It was Ninit Ukyas who gave me the list of instruction, and number one in the list is to do dry fast for straight 10 days.
Sino po nagbigay ng instruction?
Ninit Okyas.
Nenet Okyas.
Yeah.
Okay po.
And then, I only was able to eat a little amount of rice and viand on the 39th day because when you had fasted, hindi naman kailangan kakain ka agad. So, there was water, then then lugaw, and then finally on the 39th day, that was the time I was able to eat rice. And then after that, there was that second round of fasting, which was even more miserable. It started on February 6, 1999, and there were other workers also. And that was very miserable because it was like this. We were given 5 days or sometimes 7 days. It was a kind of a series of fasting. The first, second, third days were for dry fasting, meaning you were not allowed to drink, of course, to eat food, dry foods. And on the fourth, sometimes it's water, sometimes it's sometimes it's lugaw. Then another 5 days, the same pattern. Sometimes it became 7. It ended on the it ended on the month of May because I have my diary on that.
So yung pangalawang dry fasting, 3 buwan na may iba't ibang klaseng fasting for 5 days or 7 days, 1 to 3 days na dry fasting.
Yes.
On the 4th day may tubig o yung yung pinakuluan ng sinaing, di ba? Yung
And-
pinapainom ng mga lolo't lola natin sa mga baby nung panahon ng World War II.
Yung sabaw ng ano po.
Sabaw.
lugaw.
Sabaw ng lugaw.
Yes po.
Or lugaw. So over 3 months, may ganitong series ng mga iba't ibang klase ng dry fasting.
Yes po. But I was together with other workers also because they were also punished, but I was the longest. I stayed there for the longest 3 months.
And yung una pong dry fast, yung unang set ng pagpapadry fast sa inyo na 10 araw, walang pagkain, walang tubig. 10 araw na walang tubig at 10 araw na walang pagkain?
Yes po, that's true.
Paano niyo po na-survive yun?
I did not even think I would survive
Opo.
because of course the place was cold. And then every time in the morning when I took a bath, so parang doon ko na lang nalalasap yung tubig. Kaya I keep taking a bath 3 times a day.
Iniinom nyo na lang yung
Halos, hindi ko mainom
tubig
kasi
pampaligo.
natatakot ka namang baka masira yung tiyan mo. Parang ganun lang, parang
And after 39 days, ganun ulit, pinainom muna kayo ng tubig, ng and then pinakain ng lugaw, and finally, kanin.
yes, on the 39th day. But there was a month, I think it was month of December, may kinain na rin ako doon. Kaya lang, again, maybe they were not satisfied with the result. Maybe they wanted me to really slowly kill me. So again, I had another series of fasting. That was, as what I have said, it started on February 6th and ended on the month of May.